Littlehales is our next presenter, and he's going to talk to you about the one thing that has the greatest impact on your health: sleep.
Lots of myths and misunderstandings, get your 8 hours, see you tomorrow. One of the major health pillars, very much the third or fourth health pillar.
They're a little bit hesitant to make changes. There's so many things that are happening in our lives right now that are beyond our control.
One of the leading contributing causes of death and disability in industrialized countries is high blood pressure and its consequences, the heart attacks, the strokes.
If I have anything, I try 3 days of fasting. And if it doesn't get better, I consider a treatment.
Practical demonstration of what I want to share with you today, which is breath work.
Probably around, I would estimate me to be around 16 years old. And my mother had psoriasis, just a small amount on her elbows.
Helps with inflammation. It helps with there's so many medical benefits associated with cold exposure.
We're going to begin with the first element, which is water.
Today we're going to talk about memory. It's a very hot topic, and I am very passionate about helping people improve their memory and age healthfully, cognitively, physically, and socially.
All right, so here joining me is Stan Malek. He is a homesteader who also works full-time as a law enforcement officer. So I really appreciate him taking some time off to join us. Now, after battling a worsening psoriasis for years, he discovered the power of quality food and its impact on his skin condition. Recognizing the cost of organic food as being very expensive, he knew he needed to do something to make obtaining these foods more affordable. Without any experience, he decided to start growing his own food in his small backyard, which was within the traditional city neighborhood. So he had to get started with a few raised beds. The improvement to his psoriasis motivated Stan to produce and raise even more food, so he moved just outside the city on a 3-acre slice of heaven where he created Rocky Creek Homestead. It's a pleasure to have Stan here with us today to dig deeper into his inspirational story. All right, Stan, so let's start with, take us back in time to you discovering that you had this skin issue and, what that was like and then what happened from there.
Yeah, so it was probably around, I would estimate me to be around 16 years old. And my mother had psoriasis, just a small amount on her elbows. So I kind of knew sort of what it was to a certain degree, but mine didn't start where I could obviously see it. I started noticing on my scalp that I thought I just had what was bad dandruff per se. And so I just kind of treated it like anything, got some normal shampoo. I just thought it was part of, who knows, puberty at that point in time. And, but then after probably about 3 or 4 months, I noticed it was getting worse to the point that there was like large, thick patches under my hair that I couldn't see, but obviously wasn't normal. And then trying to comb my hair was tender to the touch. And I just knew that that's not normal. So I talked to my mother about it, and she thought, hey, we probably need to go to a doctor because I do wonder if you may have something similar to me. And so we did end up going to see a family doctor, and they immediately said, yes, it is absolutely psoriasis. And when we asked what causes it, they really didn't have an explanation other than it's your immune system just reacting, and it's trying to heal something that's really not there, and it's just creating a lot of extra skin cells. Nothing we can do. We're just going to try to manage it as best we can. They had recommended just over-the-counter stuff, so I started with typical for psoriasis people and eczema, coal tar shampoo, Neutrogena T-gel was what I used, and that did actually manage it very well. I saw immediate relief for several months, and I thought as a teenager, hey, I'm good. That's it. No problem. Move on with life. Well, unfortunately, about 6 months to a year later at most, it was no longer effective. No matter how much I used, I increased strengths of the shampoo, and with no avail, I ended up back at the doctor. And it got to the point I started noticing too that it was no longer just on my scalp. I started having it appearing on my elbows and a little bit on my kneecaps. And so my mother took me back, and they started out, they said, yes, we're going to put you on a prescription ointment now. And it was kind of a lower grade steroid cream called fluosinide. But I was a little bit worried because they tell you, you need to use this every day, but don't use too much of it because it can have a lot of different side effects. But as you're young, you just do what the doctor tells you. And when I would put it on, just as with the coal tar shampoo, it went away right away. And so I was happy for that moment because I thought we had achieved something. Well, history repeated itself, and that worked for about a year. And then all of a sudden, the cream's no longer working. It progressively got worse. So we're back at the doctor. And the doctor's immediate answer was, I'm just going to give you stronger cream. So we started going that route. Well, then over the course, that kind of managed me for a couple years. But throughout those years, it slowly stopped working. And then I started resulted in having areas on my chest. They started showing up on my back, started showing up in my armpits, started showing up in my groin area, pretty much about anywhere with the exception of my feet. I pretty much had it in some form or fashion. I started getting it inside of my ears, on my eyelids. And I kind of reached a point where I wasn't really sure, is this really going to be the way to address this?
Yeah. What was like the emotional impact and the, like, how, especially you start having that as a teenager and you're growing, as a man, and you have, like, did that have a psychological impact on you?
I think it absolutely did, especially in the younger years, because when you're a teenager going through high school, I was fortunate for most of my high school years where I had it, couldn't really be seen unless I was at like a pool or out on the beach. And then I was kind of subconscious of other people looking at it. But kind of my early adulthood, I'd be at work and people weren't necessarily rude, but you constantly would have people saying, hey man, what is that? Hey, you got something on you. Did you hurt yourself? And you'd have to explain it. So it definitely, the public per se wasn't too much, but I was so subconscious of it. I was constantly thinking about it and trying to hide it per se, because most people didn't know what it was because it's new to them unless you know somebody or been diagnosed with it.
Yeah,
so
you can't explain what caused it, makes it even more difficult when, you can tell people it's a skin condition, well, why do you have it? Like, well, I don't know. It's like, well, what's wrong with you? Why do you have this? Okay. So then what happened?
So the doctor so I reached a point where we had gotten so bad, the doctor had told me that we could explore biologics, which would be injections or some very strong pills, but that could adversely affect my liver and could probably cause issues if we decided to have children down the road, because it can pass on side effects to your babies. And so I was really hesitant to go to that extreme. And so I tried to manage it for a period of time. There'd be days where my wife would put the creams on my back and my chest, and I would just lay in bed for an hour, trying not to move so it could soak in. And so I finally decided I got to figure out something on my own. I don't want to go down this route of trying all these other options. And so I started just researching and exploring different diets. I tried, no dairy diet. I tried gluten-free diet. I tried more meat-based diet, hoping that would cure it, because some people said that. And the gluten-free one caused minimum improvement, and the rest really didn't do me any good at all. And then I kind of just decided, let me just start eating healthier and start working out, because stress and alcohol and different things can also be contributing factors. And I thought if I start working out, eating healthier, maybe that'll reduce stress and maybe I'll get some benefits that way. And so there was a local co-op, an organic grocery store near where we lived in the city. And I started buying as much organic oriented food as I could, non-processed foods. And I really stuck with it. And I kind of got two benefits, because I lost a bit of weight and I got in very good shape. But then I also noticed that my psoriasis, I was using my medicine less and less. And then before I knew it, I was down to only having it on my scalp and inside of my ears. All the other places, which I would estimate to be about 85% of what I had just slowly started going away on its own. And the only unfortunate thing to that was that grocery store was very expensive, and trying to continue to buy that stuff. So then I started figuring out, creative ways of how am I going to, this is working so well, I don't want to lose this, but I got to find a way to fit it into my lifestyle, both time and financially. And so that's when I started exploring more options related to that.
All right. So before we start digging into those options, which is where your story is already really interesting, but it takes another turn. Let's talk more. Like, so during this transition to this other food, like what else happened? Your psoriasis is going away. 85% is healing itself. You're losing weight. You're in better shape. But what about, like, how much are you enjoying the food itself? Because a lot of people, they don't want to walk down this path because they're like their fast food. They don't think vegetable tastes as good. So talk about like how that transition is taking place.
No, I think that's a fantastic point, because when you only eat what I consider conventional grocery store food, that's like your baseline of what you think that all tastes like. And I did find that I started eating other produces that I typically didn't like, because the taste of it and the texture and just the way it looked and the way it actually made me feel, it was a tremendous difference. Especially, I wasn't a very heavy produce eater, but now I've become a person who eats a lot of that stuff. And once you have fresh farm raised type products like that, and then you go back to something that's just massively produced from large scale farming, there is a very noticeable difference in the taste. And my wife, who she saw the benefits of what was happening, so she was supportive financially to continue buying that stuff. But even she herself would make comments about, wow, this tastes so much better than what we were buying before. And so there is certainly a definite, not just quality to your body for your health, but quality to the palate to make you be more enticed to eat healthier options, was most certainly a factor that definitely weighed in on a lot of it as well.
Did you all start exploring new recipes?
We were trying all kinds of stuff that we had never had before. The particular grocery store we were at, you could sign up for these boxes where they cooperated with local farms within 50 miles of our area. And you didn't even know what produce you were getting. You just got a random box of produce and you could get it for a little bit cheaper rate. And so you had to get creative on stuff you've never tried and recipes to do with it. And it expanded our knowledge and our palate for foods that we never would have tried and that we ended up really liking a whole lot.
All right. Beautiful. So, all right. So you're having this exciting discovery, lots of first time in your experience with food. So how do you start stepping into, okay, I need to grow. I need to start growing this stuff myself.
So working in law enforcement at that time, I was working 12-hour shift works, and sometimes I was on night shift. So while the family was sleeping at 2 or 3 a.m., I was YouTubing because it's hard for me to sit down and read a book. So I went to YouTube for a lot of knowledge. And I came across a particular channel where a guy named Jason runs it, who grows his own farm. And I was looking at his setup, and he did a video that it was entitled, "You Can Do It." And his whole emphasis was that it doesn't matter if you had a little patio in an apartment or if you got 20 acres. We can all control to some degree of what we want to grow, and it's easier than you think. And it just, for some reason at that time, it resonated with me, and I just started watching more of his content. And he was teaching how to grow stuff, proper ways to do it, simplifying it for a lot of people, and how he as well worked full time. And so that hit with me because I always wondered, working full time, do I have time to do it? And so I decided, I only had a small backyard, and I thought to myself, well, what if I build 2 raised beds, and I will see what I can grow, and whatever I can grow will be great, and then I'll just supplement with the grocery store. And so that's what I did. I went to the hardware store, built 2 raised beds. In that first year, we planted some lettuce, and I think I did three corn stalks and got a whole 4 ears of corn off of it. Some carrots, some radishes, and it was something to supplement a little bit over the summer. But what it ended up being, it was a small catalyst to a fire that got ignited within me and made me want to do so much more after that.
All right, that's awesome. So let's talk about the difference we had when we first chatted. We had that conversation, right? So buying organic is already a huge leap into ensuring that you have better quality produce, and by that, higher nutrient. but that's still not as good as what you can homegrown. And can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So for me, a lot of growing it at home is that I know every single thing that has gone into that plant from the moment it was a seed all the way until I ate it. So I know every single piece of additive that's ever been done to that, and I have full control of it. And I, actually, through my research, when you read up on stuff, even though the kind of the threshold for what can be labeled as organic nowadays is actually starting to become a little bit more laxed. And so even though something is organic, there could potentially still be something that is being used in that production that could potentially still cause something to people that may be sensitive, such as me with my psoriasis. And through this process, the only thing that I could think of in my mind as to why I was getting relief by eating these types of foods is that psoriasis is an immune response to something in the body that it doesn't want there, and it's trying to combat it. And the only thing that I could equate it to from grocery store foods compared to homegrown or organic from the co-op, which came from local farms, is that there's some kind of item that is being used in that mass production that my body does not want, and it tries to attack it. Because once I eliminate it, I had significant improvements. And so for me, it's knowing that I had eyes on that product from day one until it goes to my family's table. And I can confidently say that I know everything that's impacting us when we go to eat that food.
Yeah, that's beautiful said, because there are so many toxins in our environment that we're unaware of, and for some people you're processing it, but it doesn't mean it's not impacting you. And for some people, like Stan is saying, like his body was clearly rejecting it. And, just because his body's rejecting it is making obvious this is a toxin, it doesn't mean that just because you're not rejecting, you're not absorbing toxin. So we're definitely absorbing toxin. The other thing is, the dirt that is farmed over and over again. So even organic farms, if they're not rotating, the dirt doesn't have the same minerals in it. Therefore, the food doesn't have the same nutritional value. So you want to add value, you have to turn to growing it yourself. So you've got these raised beds. So how long are you doing things just through the raised beds before you start thinking, okay, I actually want to I want to go deeper into this?
So my wife always says I'm either all in or nothing. And so it wasn't very long. I got one spring of growing that produce to where I said, you know what else I can fit in this backyard is I think we need a couple of chickens, and we need some farm fresh eggs to go along with this, because although the produce was helping me a lot, at the end of the day, I'm a little bit of a stockier fella, and I needed some protein, and I wanted some eggs from some homegrown chickens. And so I built a coop with no plans and some scrap wood, and before we knew it, I told my wife I was going to be getting just 3 chickens because she thought I was crazy at this point, because we had no experience at all with raising anything other than a dog. And I told her I thought we could do it, that I didn't watch some YouTube videos, I'm ready. And she wasn't believing me. And before we knew it, what was supposed to be 3 chickens, I may have came home with about 6 of them. And but we raised those chickens up, and before we knew it, 6 months later, we had our first eggs being produced right there in our small backyard, along with our garden that was 5 feet away from them. And I can tell you right now, if you eat a fresh egg that comes from a coop compared to a grocery store egg, and I've done them side by side, blind tested with other people, there is a significant difference in the quality of that egg.
Yeah, and that looks actually completely different as well. And
Yep.
I buy the pasteurized eggs because I'm not at the point where I can have my own chicken coop. But I stayed, when I did an Airbnb, one of the places I stayed at in Portland, they had a chicken coop, and they're like, we got more eggs than we can eat. And I was like, I guess I will take the hand, I will take care of those eggs. And it was such a treat. I felt so spoiled to have those eggs every day.
And see, with the eggs too, if you do reading, a lot of people told me you can't eat a lot of eggs, it's bad for your health. People have said that too much egg yolks, you can just only eat the whites, don't eat the yolks. Well, even if you do a lot of research on that, that's related to large commercially produced eggs, where chickens have very minimal room to move. They will adjust lighting in factories at times to make them think it's technically 2 days in one. So they'll lay their eggs twice in a day versus once a day, because most chickens will lay once a day, depending on the breeds. And so they're eating a lot of food that typically they're not doing, that is also mass produced. And then they're also laying their eggs faster than what they should, versus if you do the comparison in nutritional value, and there's been many studies on this, is that actually fresh organic raised eggs actually have way higher in beneficial vitamins and minerals, and a whole lot less fat content than any commercially produced eggs do. And they've actually showed that they are actually, the yolks in particular from farm raised organic eggs are actually not at all, the fats in them are actually good fats, and it's not a detrimental to your health like what they used to portray years ago.
And the food industry is still fooling people. You got to go out there and get that research. And one of the YouTube doctors I listen to, he, whole eggs, pasteurized, free range, organic eggs is literally the best food that you can consume as far as the nutrition value and the way that the body can absorb it and make use of it. So it's when you educate yourself on all of that, it is mind blowing, and it is so impactful in changing your health and improving your health. So all right, so now you got the chickens, you got your raised beds, and what happens next?
Well, so I start looking up land all the time to my wife, and I told her, I says, I think I want to go bigger. And she, again, I believe, thought I was crazy and thought we were getting in over our heads with what we were doing. We had my daughter, who was only a couple years old at the time, and she trusted in me. I said, let's just put the house on the market. If it's meant to be, it'll happen, and then let's see what we can find. And by luck would have it, we had full price contract in like a couple days. And so then the hunt was on, and fortunately, not far, we found a small 3-acre piece of property just outside of the city that we both worked in. And immediately the brain juices were flowing. And before we knew it, within the first year of being here, I had a large in-ground garden that's about 50 by 75. We ended up starting right off with our chickens, which we have more now. We're now up to about 20 laying hens. And then after that, I told her we wanted to get some rabbits. And so she got on board with that. And then the last thing where she thought I had really gone over the top was when I told her I wanted to get a couple pigs. And before we knew it, we had all of those items right at our first year of living here at this property now. And since doing so, we went from averaging probably around $160 a week at the grocery store to now we are usually around $70 or $80 a week. So we've cut our grocery store in half. And even then, most of that is because we have a newborn, and it's a lot of stuff associated with the newborn. But when COVID and everything was going on, we had such security here, because while everybody was worried about availability at the grocery store, we weren't concerned at all, because we had plenty to be able to provide us throughout the year.
Oh, I love it. And I love the escalation, the pushing, so many first times, so many new experiences, and get a little bit of information and just do it. You can only know until you do. You can only educate yourself up to a certain point, and until you actually do it, you're not going to know what you don't know, because you have to be doing it to know. So do you have an example of that, to where you definitely, once maybe you get the pigs, or maybe it's the chicken, or maybe something else, where you're like, this is interesting?
So I definitely got the most kind of pushback per se from my peers when they were already where we're at and coming from living in a traditional city environment, most of our friends live in that environment. So when we talked about this stuff, it was, you don't have any experience in that. Hey, there's no way you can do that. And so as we did little bits, they kind of were on board. But when I said, I think we're going to get some pigs, I can't think of a single person who said that they thought it was going to work out or that it was going to be a good idea. And I did a lot of research, though, to make sure that the breed that we got would be something that I felt confident that we would be able to manage and handle. And, with the wife's support, we did it. And it was probably one of the most nerve-wracking experiences not knowing it, because it's one thing to manage a small chicken that you don't have any experience in, but to manage an animal that could get up to 300 plus pounds with no experience, that was quite an undertaking for us to do. But fortunately, we have now raised 5 of them in our time. And, people were surprised that we were able to do it. It was very nerve-wracking, but we just took it one day at a time. And we reached out to people who had experience that we didn't even know, and it was amazing. I had a lady here locally who raised the same breed, and I just out of nowhere asked her, I'm thinking about getting these. Can I come hang out at your farm? I promise I'm not a creeper. I just really want to come and learn before I dive into this adventure. And I was amazed at people, small farmers in the local area, that actually appreciated somebody with no experience having a passion to look into this. And their willingness to help has been tremendous. And I think that's really helped us to get over that hump and to build just enough confidence to take that final leap and finally give it a try. And it's paid off generously. And that's kind of my goal with what we do now, is to help those who may be on that fence in any way we can, to allow them to have this opportunity to have their own fresh food as well.
Oh, love it. Once you venture, you do realize that you meet new people and they want to share their passion. They want to help you. They want to be there for you. And the naysayers that are stuck in unfortunately, it's just the world that they know, and they don't have the curiosity of stepping out of that. You can hope that you're setting the example and you are bringing produce to share, and hopefully you can light a fire in them to also get curious and get interested. Now, for the sake of the audience as they're listening, now, are the pigs a food source? Is that why you got them for as well?
So for us, anything I try to bring on here, we do have them serve some form of a purpose, just because they are costly. And so you do got to have a reason for that. And so our pigs in particular are a source of food for us. We're not a huge red meat eater. We do eat red meats, but for the most part, we are typically a chicken or pork eating family. And so it works out well for our setup that we can raise those types of animals where we're at. And so, yes, the pigs that we raise raise them just for us. Now, I don't do the processing on my own. We have a local a butcher that does it as humanely as possible. And so we coordinate with them to do it. We know their handling practices and how they operate. And so I probably spoke with about 6 different ones before we agreed upon them, and that's where I felt comfortable. Now, if there was any part of this journey that we've done that has been the most difficult, when you're not used to that type of we just see something packaged at the grocery store and we don't think anything about that. I will say that the day that we took our first ones there, it honestly was probably the hardest decision that I ever had to make. My wife told me we have processed our own chickens here as well for meat, because we did migrate to that eventually, knowing that that's our larger meat source. But there's something about the pigs that was much more difficult for me, even though I wasn't doing those. We do our chickens ourselves, or at least I do. But the pigs was definitely the hardest thing. And I think that for most people who want to start growing their own food or raising their own food, I definitely do suggest a garden being your first thing, because there's not as much of an emotional attachment to something as that, as to where when you do raise animals for your own, then there is an emotional attachment that does develop if you're caring for that animal in the way that you should. And the only way that I've been able to come to terms with that in my mind is in 2 ways. Is that, number one, I have researched and I've seen what commercial farming can raise animals as. And I know that the animals that I raise have lived on average here for a year on my land and that I've given them the best care I possibly can. They've had belly scratches. They've had the best food. They're living here on grass and in sun, and they're not living on concrete. Most large commercially produced pork lives a life on concrete with only a couple feet at most separating them between the other pigs. My pigs have probably around 50 yards of grass space per pig, and they're living out here in the sunshine, living life for a year. So I just know that I'm giving them a much better life here than what they would have had in a commercial setting. And then at the end of the day, they are in turn giving my family great benefits and health. And in some form, as bad as it sounds, they're almost sacrificing for the sake of my family to have a healthy lifestyle. And so we definitely have an appreciation for our food much more. America, unfortunately, is very wasteful when it comes to food and the amount of food that we just toss away without thinking about it. And so I have found that we use every part of that animal, if at all possible. Everything from, I got every bit of fat back from them. We've rendered that down to use, whether that's for making soap, cooking, or all different types of stuff. But we want to make sure that no part of that animal, if at all possible, goes to waste, and that we want to make sure that we value that. And that's one of the greatest things I've seen is in my daughter, who has now gotten to the age where she understands everything. But for her appreciation of food at her age, to me, has even more harnessed what we're doing and solidified that I feel like what we're doing is in the best interest of us and our family.
It is so powerful, such a tremendous message, because it's not just your food source, you care for, you look after your food source, and like you said, you have such a much greater appreciation for it. And I'm a meat eater, and I'm envious and jealous that I maybe it would change my relationship. Maybe I would stop eating meat if I found myself, living on a farm and raising, the animal. I'm choosing to be ignorant about the meat that I eat. Of course, I do organic, grass fed, and all of that. But like you said, they can probably put those labels on, and it's still not the best quality of life for that animal. And I'm certainly not scratching their belly. I don't have that closeness with them to where every bite I take, there's a love, there's an appreciation, and there's no waste of it. And I think, when as humans, when we were hunting for our food, we were gathering for our food, we had that appreciation. And it's, homesteaders, I would love to get to the point where I do become one, because I think your relationship with food, with the earth, with, what it all means, is just at a whole other level. And the fact that you get to teach your daughter, and another newborn, so second kid, that incredible appreciation is just so powerful. And what I love about your story is that you weren't raised on a farm. No, nobody taught you this, right? So again, curiosity, action, and then going from there. And that means that anyone can make those choices. And your health, you constantly benefit. Your health is constantly benefiting from that.
Well, and it's not just, it started out as me benefiting me. And like we talked about, eating qualities of foods. And I learned, like kids nowadays, I worked as a school resource officer as part of my law enforcement career. So I would see traditional lunches at the schools and what kids were eating. Mm-hmm. And most kids, if you give them the opportunity to eat, bread and cheese and Doritos and stuff, that's what they're going to choose. Well, I have found that when you grow your own food, my daughter, when we eat dinner each day, because we do have to supplement some stuff from the grocery store, obviously, but my daughter, she will look at me at dinner time quite often, especially when the garden's in full bloom, and she'll stop and say, "Dad, are these the cucumbers that we grew? Is this the cabbage that we grew? Or these our carrots? Is this our chicken?" And if I say yes, she is more apt to try it in a heartbeat, compared to anything else that I give her. And prior to that, we would try to get her to try new stuff all the time, and she would fight us tooth and nail. But so even her watching it grow, and the only thing I can equate it to is she herself has some pride because she'll spend time out there with us, or curiosity. And so we've gotten her to eat so many more healthier options that we probably would have never been able to get her to do had she not been participating out there with us. But like you talked about with, that attachment and stuff, that's kind of my wife. She struggles with that. And so she'll go out there with the egg laying chickens all day long. She'll go to the garden all day long, but she's made a conscious choice to not spend a lot of time with, certain animals that we do process for meat, because some way it is an ignorance or kind of blinders to it. But for her, for right now, that's kind of the way that she's been able to balance it. And so I think a lot of it is for people to look at themselves and know themselves as a person, and doesn't make you a homesteader by living completely sufficiently off the land. I think the biggest goal that I try to get to everybody is that to base off your life situation is to try to determine what little bits of improvements you can do on your day-to-day life, whether you're going to start out with just a couple potted plants and grow you some herbs for tea or whatever you may want to do with that, or if you just want to focus on just growing a garden itself. You can live a life as a vegetarian if you choose to do so. There's nothing wrong with that. I think you just got to put your emotional state and what's acceptable to you based off of where you live currently. But I think the biggest thing is just starting and do something now, even if it's small, and then just like we did, progressively work up from there. And I think you won't look back on it with any kinds of reservations or be upset with anything you did. I think you're only going to see appreciation. Yeah.
It's just not something that you're going to regret. And next month in the New Life Skills Summit, we actually have Melinda Myers. And so she's a world-renowned gardener, and she gives some tips on how to get started with gardening. And it's something that, frankly, right now I'm completely beating myself up about that, because it is, I want to be, could at least be doing my own herbs. I mean, it's living in the desert, I walk around the neighborhood and I see it, things hanging. So I need to, take my own advice and take your advice and get this done. So let's go through some pictures that you've shared with us, maybe inspire some folks.
Well, I knew we were on a lot of firsts, so most of the pictures I shared with you were first of a lot of our of our milestones through our journey. And so this would end up being part of what we called Madison's Melon Patch. That's my daughter, and she ended up falling in love with growing watermelon. So this year we got all kinds, but that was actually the first watermelon that we had ever harvested from our garden, and I think it ended up being about a 30-pound watermelon. So it ended up being about half the size of her, so we were pretty excited about that. Never grew watermelons a day in our life, but we just put some seeds in and hoped for the best, and that's what we ended up with.
Big old thing came out. Oh, wow. Chicks.
Yeah, these little fellas here, these were actually, these weren't our egg layers. This was actually our first adventure at raising chickens that we would harvest here on our property for our family. And we started out with, we raised 15, and fortunately, 12 of the 15 ended up making it all the way to the time that we ended up processing them. And my daughter, she swears by the chicken that we raise and what we eat. And that is definitely one thing she asks me every time I cook a chicken, is whether or not it's our chicken. And even in her class, kids asked her, why do you do that? You can just go to the grocery store. She said, you haven't had my chicken. And that's kind of great to see. And we lost a couple of those early on as chicks. That's one thing that raising, there are different, they're called broiler chickens and egg laying chickens, and broiler chickens are more meat produced chickens, are just larger bodied. But when they're chicks, they're more susceptible to various things causing them not to make it. And we did lose a couple in a couple of days of receiving them, but the rest were healthy, and we were very appreciative to be able to have them on our homestead.
Awesome.
And these were our first pigs that we had ever gotten. These are when they were little babies. Now, they weren't nothing like that by the time they got to their end. They are by far my favorite animal that we raise on our homestead, though. If I had any goal moving forward, maybe upon retirement, I'd get a few more acreages, and I'd have 30 of these. I love these pigs. I make sure that they have a wonderful life, but if any homesteader is going to be new and they want to look into larger meat production, with the exception of raising chickens, this breed in particular is called a Kune, and they are the easiest animal. Honestly, they're the biggest animal, but in my opinion, the easiest animal that we care for on our homestead when it's all said and done. And it's the one thing that people try to discourage us from doing from the beginning.
And again, a reminder, you work full time. So
I do.
You manage all of this, and you work full time.
This was just those same little chickens, just as they got closer to their end age. That was probably they probably still had about 3 more weeks to go beyond this point. But as you can see, though, you're not going to find many commercially produced chickens that are living on grass such as that. And they're just in a mobile coop that I have on wheels and a rope. And pretty much every single day, they get to go onto a new fresh piece of grass, and they love it. They get fresh air, eating on the bugs, running around, having a good time. And just as with the pigs, we feel like we gave them a great life, and in turn, they helped us out.
And they keep your land healthy.
Yeah, and that was the infancy of our garden. Those were the very first plants we put into our big garden when we started up. That was some of the cucumber plants we went in. My original plan was to be able to shoot this from outside, but unfortunately, so y'all could actually see the homestead behind me. But unfortunately, we got a heck of a windstorm going on today, and there was just no way that was going to work out audio wise. So unfortunately, we had to be inside, and that's why I wanted to make sure I got these pictures to you, just so people could see some legitimacy to what we're doing and try to envision it. And this one was, my daughter was super excited because she found that we finally had some tomatoes growing on the vine, and she started yelling for me, and she looked back and gave me a big thumbs up because she was so proud that she saw a tomato starting to form. And so
awesome.
A lot of this, no, you're good. This is still just remnants of her melon patch. Those were all a type of a cantaloupe that's based out of France. They were some of the best tasting cantaloupes I've ever had. They're called the Charente melons, and they are super sweet. And it's just stuff we never tried. You get seeds. Seeds cost $2-3 a pack, and we produced all of that off of probably 4 seeds that we stuck in the ground.
That is incredible.
This is just showing some variety of different things we were able to get in, because honestly, last year was our first year with our big in-ground garden. So most of what you're seeing here is stuff we did in our very first year trying to raise this stuff. And some stuff was successes, some stuff wasn't. You can see our onions there didn't get very big, but at the end of the day, they still tasted great, and we put them to use. Nothing went to waste.
That is awesome. Look at this bounty.
Yeah, that's just one day's work. And in the prime time of the summer garden, for what we did, this was about a every 4-day occurrence. So we actually got to the point we didn't know what to do, which that became, how do we preserve this? And so then we started learning how to can stuff and preserve stuff. And so I talked about the COVID pandemic, and when all that hit, I was able to look back, and I got green beans frozen. I got squash frozen. We got cucumbers and pickles and relish, and I got salsa. It was nice to be able to just be creative with meals, but we didn't have to worry about going to the grocery store. Other than the toilet paper shortage, we were in pretty good business.
I haven't quite figured out that one yet, right?
No, either have I. And this was actually just a picture to show you. This was the backyard in our city before we moved. And honestly, this photo takes up probably about just shy of 25% of our backyard. So our backyard really was not big. And I had those 2 raised beds in the back corner there. And then these were our very first egg-laying chickens that we had ever raised. And, of course, that's how small my daughter was then. I want to say she was about 3 years old because she's 7 now. And, it started out looking out for me and healing my body. But now I look at it as a way to pass on information and knowledge of food and where it comes from to my children. And now I just want to try to be a help to anybody else who wants to control the quality of their food.
That is so incredible, inspirational. And so how can people get in touch with you, find information, track your journey and your progress, and maybe ask you some questions?
So the easiest ways are either you can visit our website at rockycreekhomestead.com, and on there I have a blog. You can also email me. I usually can respond to people within a day, so that works out pretty well. And then our main platform that a lot of people do follow us on is we do have a YouTube channel, and we post updates. I try to do 2 videos a week. At the least, we do 1 a week just because working full-time, sometimes things does happen. And so we've been able to log a lot of that journey and help a lot of people out, and we've gotten a lot of help from people. And then we're on your traditional social media platforms too, of course, like Facebook and Instagram. And I get a lot of messages. I probably get most of my messages through Instagram, or sometimes the website, or just people commenting on the YouTube channel. But whichever way works best for people. But we invite anybody to come along, and we share our mistakes too, so you can learn from those. And we try to have a good time. And I just can't thank y'all enough for allowing us to come on and have this opportunity with you all and to share our story. Any way we can help people either with this or to help with their psoriasis, then I know how much it's meant to me, and hopefully it can be a help to somebody else.
Well, thank you again. Your story is such an inspiration, and it ties so deeply in the concept of what I believe of, you have the first time, you have the new experience, you let them lead you to where they have to take you, what they have to teach you, how they're going to benefit you. And then you take the next leap, and the next leap, your confidence grows. You get more comfortable with the situation. You get more curious, you explore more, you share, you change your environment, the people. And, that's why it's a journey. It's a journey for some in your experiences. And, it comes in many different ways, but you have life choices. You have such a hold and a handle on such a huge part of life, which is how we nourish, feed, and take care of ourselves. I mean, we didn't even touch it. You slightly mentioned the soap making, so I'm sure you're going to be exploring once you're probably retired, your world is going to expand even more, because you're going to have all this time to now explore all the other things that you can make yourself, that you can create, that be self-sufficient by just learning, applying, and then producing. So like I said, I'm jealous, I'm envious, and I'm very thankful that you joined us today.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Confidence is a domino effect. Every time you do a new first and you have success with it, your confidence just keeps growing, and the world's the opportunities are endless at that point. And I just encourage anybody to go out of that comfort zone, put some seeds in the ground, and start growing your own food. You won't look back.
Excellent. There'll be no regrets.